Harold Jones, in my opinion, was an evil psychopath. He destroyed lives back in 1921, and he's affecting people right to this very day.
Sexual sadists come in all shapes and sizes, and Harold Jones was a sexual sadist even by the age of 15.
Clever, conniving, scheming individual, an evil young man.
In 1921, Harold Jones murdered 2 young girls. His crimes almost destroyed this quiet Welsh mining community of Abertillery. Both girls knew their attacker and trusted him. After all, he was just a 15-year-old boy himself.
What I want to find out is how the trust of the community allowed him to kill again. And did Harold Jones go on to become the man known as Jack the Stripper?
I'm Fred Dinenage, and after 40 years of reporting on serious crime, I know that a murderer can be any class, gender or age. And that's why I want to re-evaluate the horrific murders committed by 15-year-old killer Harold Jones.
2 young girls lost their lives in the most brutal manner, and nobody believed a young boy could be responsible. In 1921, Harold Jones lived in the Welsh town of Abertillery. He was one of 40,000 inhabitants packed into the narrow streets of the colliery town. Even now, 90 years on, his crimes are remembered by the local community.
Neil Milkins was born in Abertillery and is the 3rd generation of his family to grow up here. He studied the crimes of Harold Jones and is keen to talk to me about the impact they still have here. Paint a picture for me of Abertillery in the early 1920s.
Well, I know it was a bustling town. It was Abertillery was the 2nd largest town in the whole of Monmouthshire, next to Newport. But although it was bustling, it was hard times. At the time of these murders, in particular, it would have been hard for the miners because the 1921 miners' strike was on.
Like many Welsh communities, mining was the main source of income, and young boys followed their fathers into the pits. But one lad had other aspirations. Harold Jones was born in 1906 and grew up as the eldest of 4 children. Despite living in abject poverty, Harold Jones always looked smart with slick-back hair. He believed he'd become a boxer. I want to know what drove Jones to be a killer. So I've enlisted the help of leading criminologist Professor David Wilson.
This was a boy who had friends, and socialised, so clearly was somebody who was well known within the local community. There's no evidence that he was bullied at school or that he was isolated. So this is someone who was very much just an ordinary, in inverted commas, a banal, ordinary young man growing up in a Welsh community.
Jones left school at 15 and worked at the local animal feed store to help support his family. He enjoyed the job, not only for the money, but because it made him very popular amongst the local girls.
Jones was employed by the Mortimers, and unbeknownst to the Mortimers, Jones, who was 15, was having an affair with the 13-year-old daughter.
Even at the age of 15, Jones showed signs of strange behaviour in his romance with a 13-year-old girl, Lena Mortimer. A letter would be discovered in which she wrote to Jones, apologising for refusing to spit in his mouth.
The Mortimer's daughter is saying effectively to Harold Jones, don't worry about asking me to do this to you. Don't worry about it at all. Don't give it a second thought. But what it reveals is something about the sexual development of this seemingly normal, everyday young man who liked swimming and who socialised with his friends and read detective stories. So we're beginning to see in Harold Jones the emergence of a sexual sadist.
Life in Abertillery was shattered on the morning of Saturday the 5th of February 1921. 8-year-old Freda Burnell was sent on an errand by her father. Freda was one of 4 children. Friendly and polite, she would regularly be seen playing in the street. The journey to Mortimer's was less than half a mile, but she would never return home again.
This is just a girl who's, no older than 8, so we're talking about a young child here. But of course, you've got to remember the kind of community that we're talking about. Abertillery, close-knit community, people looking out for each other, living cheek by jowl, everybody knowing everybody else's business. And so nobody would have worried about a child being sent on an errand. No one would have worried about children playing outside of the house.
Well, Freda's father, Fred, offered to give her a penny extra pocket money if she was quick, because the chickens needed feeding and he wanted poultry grit and some poultry spice. Well, Harold Jones told her that he had the spice, but the grit that she required in a £10 bag, he didn't have. She went out of the shop, he caught her up and said, if you go ahead to Mortimer's warehouse at Princess Street, which is about 400 yards away, he said, I'll give her the £10 bag that you require.
Harold Jones took Freda to the store shed. It was only around the corner from the Mortimer's shop, hidden away in a back street. The little girl had no reason to fear Harold. He was no more than a child himself after all, and Freda was more than happy to follow him into the shed. Once inside, Jones launched a brutal attack on the 8-year-old. He sexually assaulted her, and to silence her cries for help, he grabbed a pickaxe handle and rained down a series of savage blows on Freda's head. The vicious attack took minutes. Jones then calmly closed the door, leaving his victim for dead, and returned to the shop as if nothing had happened.
She was heard screaming by 4 people all outside our store within a couple of yards from the storage shed. And all 4 of them just listened in silence. You heard no more, and they just carried on, just shrugged it off. Must be a child screaming while he playing.
The closest witness was Henry Arthur Duggan. He was working near the Mortimer's shed when he heard a loud scream, which he thought had come from inside it. He listened, but heard nothing more, and so returned to what he was doing.
If Henry Duggan had gone into the lane, it's possible he may have seen Freda's assailant, maybe even have saved her life. The pathology report suggests that Freda lived for about 4 hours after the attack.
Her father reported her missing to the police at 1 o'clock, which was 4 hours later, which might seem a bit unusual. She was always a very obedient girl, but he just got it into his head she must have gone to visit somebody, and he searched high and low. He had the town crier appealing for information about the girl, and of course no one come forward because no one had seen her after Harold Jones had killed her.
Freda's father's search for his daughter brought him face to face with Jones. He told the concerned parent he hadn't seen Freda since she left the shop. Freda's father had no reason to question this explanation. Concern quickly grew, and the police force and the local community joined the hunt for the missing 8-year-old. Meanwhile, as night fell, Jones set about disposing of Freda's body. He went back to the storage shed and placed her in a sack and dumped it in a nearby lane. The police force of Abertillery were about 40 strong and had very limited resources to carry out a full-scale search of the town. Hundreds of residents also joined in the hunt for Freda.
I'm about to meet Ross Mather. He's a retired police officer and historian for the Welsh Police Service. He's researched this case and the role the police played.
The night that Freda went missing, the twinkling of the lights of people with lanterns could be seen searching the areas both sides of the valleys. The police went to the local cinemas, and as you can imagine, and Valley's town on a Saturday night used to be a hive of activity with cinemas, pubs, and the police went into the local cinemas and flashed up her description and saying that she had been missing.
In this very theatre, the same night that she disappeared, an announcement was made to the people that was in the theatre watching Babes in the Wood. Please could you watch out for a little girl of 8, Freda Burnell, and gave her a description. They searched everywhere, but apparently they didn't go down that lane.
Later that evening, Harold Jones went to the home of Freda Burnell's. He wasn't there to confess, but to ask her parents if they'd found their daughter.
It's almost as if he's treating all of this as a game. So he continues to find ways of presenting himself as being normal and concerned and anxious about the little girl, even though he knows full well what happened to that little girl.
Would he feel any sympathy for the family?
No, he'd feel no sympathy whatsoever. He absolutely would not empathise with the victim. Indeed, there's some suggestion in the records that what he sought was her pain and suffering because he was quite sadistic.
At 7:30 the following morning, a collier set off on his way to work. Taking his usual route along this alley, he stumbled across what he thought was a bundle of rags. On closer inspection, he realised it was a body. 8-year-old Freda Burnell had finally been found.
The hunt was now on to find a killer, but no one suspected 15-year-old Harold Jones.
I'm Fred Dinenage, and I'm examining the crimes of Harold Jones. He was one of Britain's first ever child killers.
This 15-year-old boy killed 2 young girls in the early 20th century. Who would believe that such an innocent-looking lad could be responsible for such horrific murders? On the 5th of February 1921, Harold Jones committed his first murder. He lured 8-year-old Freda Burnell into a store shed. He sexually assaulted and then killed her. The next day, Freda's body was discovered in this lane. Her murder shocked the local community. They believe this callous act had to be the work of an outsider.
What kind of impact would that have?
It would be unheard of. In a community such as Abertillery, a murder would have been a very rare occurrence, but a child murder would have been very, very, very unusual and shocking to the local community.
Dealing with the murder of a young child was unknown territory for the local police force. Their usual crimes involved solving petty thefts and drunkenness.
Today now we've got 42 police forces within England and Wales. If you go back to the 1920s, I think that was about 220 different police forces. So you had small, tiny police forces with only 18, 20 men in, who might not have had detectives. From my understanding, there would have been about 40 policemen stationed within the Abertillery area.
The police had no clues or suspects. Desperate to find Freda's killer, more experienced detectives from the Metropolitan Police in London were called in to assist. It was common knowledge that Jones had been the last person to see Freda alive, but nobody suspected that the 15-year-old local boy could be responsible for her death.
I've worked in a number of murder cases where communities can't believe that the murderer will come from that community. It will be somebody else who has committed this murder, not one of us. It's the sense in which danger comes from the other, not from you or me.
On the day of Freda's funeral, this town came to a standstill. Shops were closed as a mark of respect, and more than 100,000 people packed the streets to pay their respects to the young girl who'd been brutally murdered.
It was on the same day as Freda's funeral that the Metropolitan Police made what they believed to be a vital breakthrough.
Someone come forward and said, do you know Mortimer got a storage shed at the back of Princess Street? And they weren't aware of it. They went there, searched it, found a an axe handle, I believe, that they later believed Harold Jones had used to hit Freda over the head. And they also found an handkerchief on the floor that had come out of Freda's pocket when she was being assaulted. Then Harold became a suspect.
Harold Jones told the police that he served Freda in the shop and had then seen her leave. A week later, he was called to give evidence at Freda's inquest. This time, though, his account of the conversation with the murder victim differed from his original testimony. Jones was one of the only people with access to the storage shed where evidence had been found. Several witnesses also testified that they'd seen Harold acting suspiciously on the day of Freda's disappearance.
All the evidence pointed towards Harold, and on March the 7th, 1921, he was arrested for the willful murder of Freda Burnell. He protested, "I am not guilty. I have always said I am not guilty, and I am still saying it."
The majority of Abertillery agreed with Harold. They believe the much-liked boy from the local shop couldn't have been responsible for the murder of Freda.
Harold Jones, this nice lad that socialises with those nice lads that I see walking, he couldn't have done it. There's outrage. Somebody who could rape, strangle and batter a little girl can't be part of our community. They must be a stranger to our community who have come into our community.
On the 20th of June 1921, Harold Jones pleaded not guilty to the charges against him. The prosecution believed Jones had murdered and raped Freda in the Mortimer's store shed. He'd stuffed her body into a sack and then, under the cover of night, dumped Freda in the alleyway, where she was later found.
Jones told the jury he'd been at work on the day that Freda had been murdered. Many others took to the stand in support of the 15-year-old.
My own opinion is there was a lot of people brought to the court to say what a good lad he was. Character witnesses, as it's known as. A lot of people give him a good character reference. But what must have really thrown the jury into doubting that he was the murderer was the fact that the Mortimers, who were the employees of Harold and owned the store, I don't think there's much doubt that they gave false evidence.
Herbert Henry Mortimer protected his employee by telling the court he'd heard Harold working downstairs in the shop during the time he was supposed to have killed Freda.
We know, perhaps the Mortimers didn't know, that when they gave evidence, that evidence might have been shaped by their daughter, who was in a relationship with Jones. And so there might have been a whole range of reasons why the Mortimers wanted to come forward to, in effect, say Harold Jones couldn't have committed this murder.
It's possible that many of the townsfolk who supported Harold Jones didn't even know him. Their judgment of his innocence would have been down to their perception of the smartly dressed 15-year-old. Professor David Wilson has organised a social experiment to illustrate how outward appearances are not always what they seem.
I've brought 6 people who currently live in Abertillery, and I want you just to describe the person that's standing in front of us as we go down the line. What about this man here?
Nice smile, laughter lines round the eyes. Yeah, lovely, happy-go-lucky fella.
Okay, and what about this woman?
Salt of the earth, absolutely straightforward, chapel on a Sunday.
What about this young man here?
I think there's nothing about him that would make me apprehensive or worried about him, I don't think.
Just an everyday boy like Harold Jones?
Yes.
Okay, what about this woman here?
Looks a very straightforward, honest sort of lady to me.
Okay, and what about this gentleman?
Well, slightly more difficult.
Why is he slightly more difficult for you?
I don't quite know why. Is it the blue eyes? Is it the way he looks at me? As if he knows something that I don't know? I don't know.
And what about this young man here?
Well, this is the obvious joker in the pack. It's the hair, but you should never judge by appearances, and though he might look, to some people's eyes, a little unusual, he's probably a very nice chap.
Okay, one of our lineup has a criminal record? Tell me who it is.
I suppose I'd have to go for this gentleman on the end.
This is Daffet, by the way.
Daffet?
Why have you chosen Daffet?
I suppose it's because of his appearance. I'm kind of drawn towards this gentleman, but I think in the end it's this gentleman's, Daffet's appearance, which makes me think maybe he could be the one.
Daffet's doing 10 GCSEs at school, is hoping to go to university, and is a fine, upstanding young member of the community and does not have a criminal record.
So wrong to judge by appearances, which is what I said earlier.
And therefore, you've got to choose from the remaining 5 who has a criminal record.
Then I'm going to go for my original choice, this gentleman here. Maybe the eyes are just a little bit too close together.
Chris was a policeman for 30 years and only recently was given the British Empire Medal because of the community work that he's done in Abertillery. He does not have a criminal record. So would the person with a criminal record please step forward?
No. Well, you'd have fooled me. Haven't you got that lovely smile and those laughter lines round the eyes?
You chose just on the basis of perception, and that's the key thing in thinking about how Abertillery viewed Harold Jones.
Lee, you fooled me, but I'm going to forgive you.
It's okay.
All the others, please forgive me. But yes, I take your point. That's how a town was fooled by a killer.
At Harold Jones's trial, the prosecutor stated that his demeanour did not indicate innocence, but rather a heartless callousness, confidence, and even arrogance.
After almost 90 minutes of deliberation, the jury returned their verdict. They found 15-year-old defendant Harold Jones not guilty. Jones was acquitted in his first trial. Would he be acquitted today?
I don't think there's any doubt that Jones would have been convicted today on the evidence that existed in relation to that first murder. I think there were just too many ambiguities and loopholes in relation to what Jones was arguing. I think all of that would have unravelled today, which it didn't do in 1921, which led to Jones being acquitted. I think he would have been convicted if he was up in court today.
The innocent-looking Jones had fooled the jury. He received a hero's welcome on his return home to Abertillery. They had no idea they were allowing a murderer back into their community. One who would kill again.
I'm Fred Dinenage, and I'm investigating the murders committed by the 15-year-old killer Harold Jones.
In the early 1920s, he became infamous for being the first boy of his age to murder 2 young girls. On the 23rd of June 1921, Jones was acquitted of the murder of 8-year-old Freda Burnell. Many believed Jones had been falsely accused of the murder. On his way home through the Western Valley, crowds lined the streets, waving and cheering. Back in his village of Abertillery, he was presented with a gold watch by his supporters and carried shoulder high through the town with a brass band playing. I'm going to meet a relative of a man who celebrated Jones's return. Susan Lloyd's grandfather would quickly regret his actions.
What do you know of the day when Jones returned almost in triumph after being acquitted?
I know that my grandfather actually congratulated Jones and actually said that he didn't believe he did it. So he was absolutely convinced that Harold Jones was innocent of the murder of Freda Burnell.
Why?
Possibly because he just lived in the same community. My own reflection on the matter would be that it bound to have been an outsider. Nobody we know would do that. You know, that we wouldn't be acquainted with anybody who was capable of murder.
Susan's grandfather had a daughter called Florence Little. They lived 6 doors away from Harold Jones. Florence was the aunt that Susan Lloyd never got to meet.
Little Florence, what sort of girl was she?
Well, I think she must have been very bright. Certainly somebody who performed in chapel and would have sung and would have read the lesson quite willingly because of having seen what the rest of the family have done. So I think that probably she was quite a bright, intelligent youngster, well liked by her peer group.
Florence Little wasn't so convinced about Harold Jones's innocence. Even at the young age of 11, she had no concerns about approaching Harold and confronting him about the murder of Freda Burnell.
People of Abertillery just couldn't believe that he'd done it. And apparently, Florrie had gone up to him and said that she knew he had done it, she'd worked out that he'd done it, and that he was guilty of Freda Burnell's murder.
A few days after his acquittal at Monmouth, Harold Jones was talking to another gang of youth, and there were a number of witnesses to say that Florence pointed a finger at Harold, and she said, "I know you killed Freda." And apparently she said this on a number of occasions. She was taunting him, basically.
Nobody can be sure if Florence actually knew of Jones's guilt or if her comments to him were mere schoolyard teasing. One thing is for certain, Harold Jones wasn't a boy who took to being taunted, and he could not resist the thrill of killing despite having been recently tried for murder.
Some people, when they murder, are completely overwhelmed by the reality that they've taken another person's life, and they would never, ever, ever dream of putting themselves in a position where they would want to kill again. However, unfortunately, there's a small group of people who, when they first take a person's life, aren't overwhelmed by that. They're incredibly excited by that and want to continue taking other people's lives.
2 weeks later, 11-year-old Florence Little played an innocent game of hopscotch outside her house, just a few doors from Harold Jones's. The young killer had been watching and approached Florence. He convinced her to come into his kitchen for a glass of lemonade. The girl who'd accused him of murder appears to have had no qualms about walking into the killer's lair. Once inside, Jones quickly struck, cutting the young girl's throat and placing her over the sink to make sure that the blood was washed away.
There must have been blood everywhere. He'd brag later on how he'd work things out in advance, and he said that he cleaned the blood up. All about a teaspoon of blood which was left in the body had gone down the sink in the kitchen of the house. He said he took it up the stairs, he put it on a table, put a rope on it and got into the attic and dragged it up into the attic. And then he said that he cleaned a little bit of an area around the attic where there was blood, and there wouldn't have been much. And then he said how he cleaned up downstairs.
So he's using violence in a very instrumental way when he drains Florence Little's blood. He's trying to get rid of evidence. It's just simply what he has to do. It's like going to the office, it's like going to work. He just needs to get rid of that body.
The teenage killer had struck again, but Florence would soon be missed. Concerned about her daughter's whereabouts, Florence's mother knocked on the Joneses' back door. She was greeted by a freshly washed Harold Jones.
And he'd even bragged how when Florence's mother went to his house to ask if Florence was in there, he had his hands behind his back, and he said, "She was here earlier, Mrs. Little, but she's gone." And Mrs. Little went, and he literally had blood dripping off his hands as he was talking to the mother.
The police began another large-scale search only months after looking for Freda Burnell. They called at the Joneses' house and questioned the boy about Florence's disappearance. Harold denied he'd seen her and pretended to be just as concerned as all the other townsfolk.
Harold went out into the street and suggested to the police that they sent to Cardiff for bloodhounds to assist in the search for Florence Little. He went out himself looking for her from perhaps 10:30 at night till 3 o'clock in the morning, and he came back home. He said there's no sign of her. He went to bed and she was in the attic above him.
The search continued throughout the night, but not all the police officers were involved. Several of the local force hadn't been convinced that Jones was innocent of the murder of Freda Burnell. They began to watch Jones, believing he could be responsible for Florence's disappearance.
The following morning, PC Cox, who'd kept watch at the back of the house, and there were police watching out the front. When Harold Jones had gone out of the house, the police then went in and searched the house. They went upstairs and PC Cox saw the walls were quite grimy, but there was one spot where it had been obviously cleaned, and he went up into the attic and he said, "I found her."
As the police recovered the body of Florence Little, Jones carried on with life as normal, unaware of the gruesome discovery.
Harold Jones's father went down to the Lamb Inn and he saw Harold, and he walked up and he said, "Harold, they found Flossie's body up in the attic. The police are going to think it's either me or you, son, and God knows it's not me." And Harold protested his innocence. "Dad," he said, "I don't know nothing about that."
Harold's father handed his son over to the local constabulary, and the boy was taken in for questioning. News of his arrest spread quickly throughout the town. As with the first murder, the local community were unwilling to accept that a young 15-year-old boy was responsible for such a vicious crime. A mob of 500 people gathered outside the police station, demanding that Harold Jones be released.
And about 500 people, men and women, surrounded Abertillery police station, threatening to kill the officers inside for fitting up Harold Jones for this second murder. And they believed they were fitting him up because they couldn't prove he'd committed the first murder.
So people still believed he was innocent?
They still believed he was innocent.
Abertillery's senior police officer was forced to come out and face the baying mob. He shouted, "I have found the body of the child in the attic at Harold Jones's house, foully murdered, and I have arrested Harold Jones."
At the inquest, Jones proclaimed his innocence. Then, a month before his trial, he changed his story and finally confessed to the murders of both Florence Little and Freda Burnell. But his reason for doing so wasn't one of conscience. As an adult, the punishment for murder was death. Jones's 16th birthday was approaching. The quicker he could get the trial completed, the more likely it would be that he would escape the hangman's noose. On Monday, November the 1st, 1921, a smartly dressed Harold Jones stood before the judge at Monmouth Court. People from Abertillery had travelled to witness the trial of the 15-year-old boy. Many were still unable to believe he would be capable of such hideous crimes. Harold pleaded guilty to the murder of Florence Little and admitted it was he who'd killed Freda Burnell.
Harold Jones was convicted of murder. The punishment for such a conviction in 1921 was death, but because Jones was 15, the judge could only sentence him to life imprisonment.
20 years later, Jones would be back out on the streets and some believe would go on to kill again.
I'm Fred Dinenage, and I'm investigating the teenage killer Harold Jones.
In 1921, he was convicted of brutally murdering Freda Burnell and Florence Little. Now I want to know what happened when he was released from prison and how Jones may be linked to a series of killings that were committed by a man known to the police as Jack the Stripper. Harold Jones escaped the hangman because he was 15 years old. Instead, he began his life sentence at Maidstone Prison alongside 600 older men.
What was he like as a prisoner?
Well, he was a model prisoner. Of course, he was a model schoolboy. He was a model young man in Abertillery. He's behaving in prison as he had behaved in the community. Normal, banal, ordinary, doesn't draw attention to himself. But the downside to that is, of course, what he's doing is masking. He's never revealing anything about what it was that led him to kill, not once, but twice. He's refusing to speak consistently to any of the psychiatrists. He refuses to open up because, of course, to engage in psychoanalysis involves the person who's being psychoanalyzed to be willing to talk about their behavior.
The murders left a lasting impact on the community of Abertillery. Their unwillingness to believe that 15-year-old Jones had been responsible for the death of Freda Burnell had helped acquit him of her murder and allowed him to kill again. Anger turned towards people who testified for Jones. The Mortimers owned the shop he'd worked in and had lied to support their employee.
That finished the Mortimers. The business shut. It'd been in business for 4 years. They shut down. They were basically run out of town. You can imagine all the people that were cheering him into town. They'd have just skulked away with their tails between their legs when they realised what they had done.
One family who struggled more than any was Susan Lloyd's. Her grandfather had welcomed Jones back, and the murderer had then gone on and killed his daughter Florence.
What was a thriving home was ripped apart by the death of Florence. There must have been tension and anxiety with that home and depression, and then my grandmother had a nervous breakdown, and it doesn't seem to have been talked about or discussed, you see.
Susan Lloyd's family eventually moved away from Abertillery to try and rebuild their lives. Harold Jones also got a chance to move on. In 1939, Britain was preparing to go to war. By this time, Jones had been in prison for 18 years. The war brought Jones hope, as did a man by the name of Alexander Patterson, who believed that men are sent to prison as punishment, not for punishment.
Alexander Patterson, his big supporter, one of the prison commissioners, one of the architects of the Borstal system, is going to write a report that basically says the sadism that Harold Jones displayed was no worse, and I quote, than the sadism we would see in some English public schools. So he's going to be saying things which basically normalizes the sadism that Harold Jones has displayed in the murders.
And he suggested that if Jones was put into the army, he would one day become the father of happy children and make a go of his life.
The governor of Maidstone Prison considered Jones to be a man with no hopeful prospects. He never seemed to show any remorse for his actions. The crimes never bothered him. Nonetheless, after 20 years of imprisonment, the authorities believed the boy who'd killed 2 young girls was now fit for release. Should he have been allowed out?
The answer is, if Harold Jones was in prison today for the offences that he committed without ever dealing with the underlying causes of why he murdered, he would never have been released.
On December the 7th, 1941, the boy who'd entered prison as a 15-year-old killer was released. He was now 35. The Second World War was raging and thousands of men were being called up to defend the country. But Harold Jones wasn't one of them.
What we know about his behaviour whilst he was in jail was he was a bit of a coward, and if people spoke to him harshly, he would burst into tears. I don't think Jones had any intention whatsoever of going into the army, but he disappears.
Little is known of Harold Jones's whereabouts during the first few years of his release. It's believed he made several visits back to his hometown, Abertillery, the scene of the murders.
He came back to Abertillery on a number of occasions when he actually went into Brunethil Cemetery to visit the graves of Freda Burnell and Florence Little.
Did he try and keep a low profile when he came back?
When he came into town, a number of people have told me he was arrogant, he was dressed dandy, his hair was brill creamed, and if he was ever pointed out, he seemed to enjoy the recognition, like as if he was a film star.
Public records reveal that in 1947, Jones eventually surfaced in London. But just how easy would it have been for a killer who'd been convicted of murder to put his evil past behind him?
There are some ingrained patterns of behaviour that we've been able to recognise in the child, Harold Jones, that we know have not been worked upon therapeutically whilst in the 20 years he was in prison, and therefore I don't think those ingrained patterns of behaviour are going to disappear. I think they're still in the adult Harold Jones who's living in London, an adult Harold Jones who's a sexual sadist.
Jones moved to Fulham, where he got married and had a daughter. Almost 15 years after his release from prison, a series of killings took place in London, not far from Jones's home. They became known as the Hammersmith Nudes murders, and the press nicknamed the perpetrator Jack the Stripper.
Between 1959 and 1965, there were 8 women murdered, and 7 of them had all their clothing removed. There were no signs of sexual assault. A number of teeth were removed from the women.
The police arrested several people regarding the murders, but they were all released. Harold Jones was never questioned. With only basic police records available and no sex offenders register, the authorities would have had no idea the convicted killer lived in the area. Almost 50 years on, the Hammersmith Nudes case is still unsolved. After extensive research, Neil Milkins believes the man responsible could have been the Welsh child killer, Harold Jones.
In 1959, when the first murder victim disappeared, he lived 2 streets from her in Fulham. Immediately after, Harold Jones changed his name from Harry Stevens to Harry Jones. He's moved 4 miles away to Hammersmith, and now he's living within 2 streets of murder victim number 7 and murder victim number 8. There's just too many coincidences in my mind that he just happened to be in this place, that place, and the other place when these things were happening.
We have a serial killer living in the streets and roads around the Jack the Stripper murders because we know Harold Jones is living there. There's no such thing in my experience in dealing with serial killers as coincidence. And for me, there's some quite compelling evidence to suggest that our Jack the Stripper may indeed have been the charming, plausible 15-year-old boy who murders 2 girls in Abertillery.
The lack of DNA evidence in the 60s means the true identity of Jack the Stripper may never be known.
We told the police this.
I have spoken to an officer from Scotland Yard, the cold case detective, and basically they say if anything new comes in, we will reinvestigate. But obviously nothing at the minute have excited them enough to want to reinvestigate.
In 1971, Harold Jones died of cancer. But just what secrets did he take to the grave with him? Neil Milkins' theory that Jones was Jack the Stripper may never be proven. But the murders Harold Jones committed as a 15-year-old provided society with a vital lesson, that even children have the ability to kill.
I think we've got to look at Harold Jones as being the beginnings of the public's understanding that children can kill. So in one sense, there's a direct line between Harold Jones and Venables and Thompson, Mary Bell, all those notorious child killers from much closer to the present day. But Harold Jones seems to me to be quite central in the development of the idea that children are able to take the life of another child.
In today's society, a child murdering another child for pleasure still shocks us, whether it's Mary Bell or the killers of Jamie Bulger or Harold Jones. So it's not hard to understand how in 1921 the community of Abertillery couldn't believe that such a crime could be committed by a child. And it was this disbelief that allowed Jones to murder again.
This case made it clear that the innocence of youth isn't always so innocent.